let me say this first. There's been a few times in our marriage that I've come home and Sarah has given me that look and she said, listen, I just want you, she didn't say listen, I always say listen, that's my word. She says, I just want you to listen. And you know what that means, guys? Do you know what that means? It means shut up. That's right. And so I think to myself, she's not back in here yet, I think free pass. Free pass. I don't have to think. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to say anything. I just got to sit here. I get to sit here and listen. And I kid you not, 2 sentences in, I'm already thinking how I can fix this problem. I can fix this and that and her and him and all I can do. All of that. We are wired, gentlemen, to be problem solvers. We've learned that over the last few weeks. But we're also different. I think about VBS. I serve at VBS here every year, and I pick second graders. If you have a second grader, just ignore what I'm about to say. I pick second graders because they're the perfect age where if you accidentally knock them over, they bounce right back up. But they're also young enough to where if you give them the look, they'll stop doing whatever they need to be doing, right? And so I like second graders. But the truth is, there was a time not too long ago where we had them decorating these bags for Christmas, for Angels of Light, which is coming up in a few weeks. And so we wanted them to decorate it with Christmas-y things, And so I sat with the girls because I kind of like to color a little bit, draw, and whatever, it doesn't matter. And my picture's better than theirs because they're in second grade. But anyways, so I sat down with the girls and I'm coloring, and they're coloring Christmas trees and they're making all these presents, and it looks real nice, real pretty. And I was like, okay, I'm going to swing over to the guys. I sit down with the boys and I look at their bags, and the entire table is drawing sharks. Sharks! And I'm like, what kind of Christmas, what is that? And in my mind, I'm thinking, this is it. This is it. This is the difference between boys and girls, men and women, male and female. Now, here's the thing. This isn't an accident. This is actually by God's design. Let me read this verse to you. You might recognize this. Psalm 139, this is King David writing. He's speaking to God as he writes this. You formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. This is God that said, I have created every piece of you. And did you know that thing that's up here in your skull, that brain, it is one of the most fascinating things. If God could speak right now, I think he would tell you, you have no idea what's wrapped up in there. And scientists would agree. They have barely begun to tap the surface of the brain, how fascinating and all how the parts work together so completely. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to look at the brain, and for the next few weeks. Tonight we're going to look a little bit more scientific, so you might put on your thinking hat for just a minute if it's possible. I don't know. But we're going to think scientifically and look at a little bit of chemistry. Then next week we're going to start looking at some practical application of how the brain navigates and how our differences are actually complementary and how it was all by God's design. But why do we do this? Because here's the thing. None of us in the room need to be told that we are different, male and female. But it is helpful when we can understand a little bit more about the how and the why. See, when we can understand, which we'll never fully understand, but when we can understand a little bit more, we look at each other and we realize that our differences can actually be strengths if we understand how they operate. We can look at your husband, which we'll talk about in a minute, and go, you are not an animal. God's actually wired you that way. You may know what I'm talking about. We'll get to that in a second. So let's jump in. 1 Peter 3:7, one more verse sets this up well and why this is important. It says, likewise, husbands, I would translate husbands or wives, love your wives or your husbands in an understanding way. Let's try to understand each other so that we can better work together. All right, here we go. Some brain basics. Here's a question. How many of you, raise your hand by voting, think that the male brain is bigger than the female brain? Raise your hand if you agree. Raise your hand if you're scared. I'm just kidding. All right. Okay. So about, that's good. Okay. So about 6 of you, give or take, agree. How many of you think the female brain is bigger than the male brain? Raise your hand. Okay. Really? Some of you are scared. All right. Well, you would be wrong. The male brain is actually 8 to 9% bigger than the female brain. Can you all just cheer for a minute? This is great. It's the only thing you're going to get tonight. I'm sorry. Here's the kicker. Oh, there's a kicker. Even though the male brain is 8 to 9, I'll say 9% bigger, the female brain is more interconnected than the male brain. Sorry, guys. Translation. It's more efficient. You're not smarter, but you kind of are, all right? You just operate better. Listen, this is fascinating. Okay, so let's look at all this. This is fun. Okay, a couple more things. First, the brain itself, male, female, if you put them together on a table, we never would, but if you did, you would notice that 98% of the brain is exactly the same, okay? But what we know is that 2% difference makes all the difference, okay? And that's what we're going to look at tonight. Now, one more fun little thing just to show you how men and women think. Put up the first slide. There was an English professor. You may have seen this before. He asked his class to punctuate this sentence. A woman without her man is nothing. Here's what the men wrote. Next slide, please. A woman without her man is nothing. Oh, that's good, right? Be careful if your wife's here. All right, let's put up the next one. This is what the women said. A woman without her man is nothing. Now, isn't it interesting how creative our ladies can be? It's because they're more efficient. Now, the point is this. We are different. We see things differently. And this is not an accident, but actually by God's design. Now, let me show you one more passage, and then we'll dive into some of the more scientific things. Genesis 1, verse 26. You may recognize this verse. I want to show this to you because it's very important. Then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. Verse 27, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female. He created them. Why did I read that to you? Because do you notice, just like we saw a few weeks ago, that nowhere in here does it say that the male or the female is better or more important than the other. In fact, by simply dissecting this and looking at how these words are used, we would see that male and female are equal. But just because we're equal doesn't mean we're the same. And that's what this is all about. It's about understanding not who's better, but how God has separated us to be more unique and also to work closely together. Let's think about girls for just a minute. Ladies, a close friend to you would be someone that you would share all those secrets with, and you probably wouldn't tell anybody else, right? That's pretty good, pretty safe. That's safe? Yeah, got one head nod. Guys, you don't tell secrets to anybody. You just play. You've been playing video games since you were a kid. You'll keep playing when you're an adult. It's called golf, all right? And so the reality is there's a difference there. We think about how we deal with stress. Ladies, for you, stress relief often comes through conversation with close friends, community. Talk it out, work through it, talk it out, work through it, talk it, work it out. Guys, you get together and you just don't talk. You just play. You do something else. This makes sense to me as I've studied this over the years. This is why I like to work out. I like to go work out. I like to be isolated and alone, all right? And I like to relieve stress by doing something physical. Guys tend to want to do something physical. That's why their new game when they get older is golf, okay? I'm trying to help you guys. I don't play myself, but anytime I can give you a hand, I'm trying, all right? But here's the thing. Ladies, and I think this is fascinating. Ladies, you are encoded in your brain to deal with emotions and memories significantly better than men. And we'll talk about the emotions in a minute, but your memory, because of all that interconnectivity, you remember things better than guys. Have you ever noticed that? Don't say anything, just think about it. Just think about it. You remember things better than guys. In fact, part of the reason your memory is better is because you're emotional. We're all emotional beings, but ladies tend to be more emotional than guys. Is that a safe way to say that? I think so. Example, you will remember things better Okay, we know that humans in general, we remember things when emotions connected to it. Okay, you may drive down the same highway every day, but if there was an accident that scared you, or God forbid you were in an accident and emotion was now of fear or whatever that might be, you now remember that moment unlike anything before because emotions connected to it. Well, ladies, because you're emotional beings more than men, you remember things better and more often than a man does. So, example, it might be a stretch here, hypothetically. Let's just say a guy took off his wedding ring. Don't ever do that. But he put it on the table and he forgot about it. And then he comes to you, which is probably another mistake, and he says, babe, I lost my wedding ring. There's all kind of problems in that, I know, but let's just roll with it. Now, he might have passed by the wedding ring numerous times, okay? But maybe you as the wife passed by just once and you looked over on the table and you saw that wedding ring, and you could go negative here and say, well, how dare you take that wedding ring off? But let's say positive, and you say, I remember that ring. I remember when he got down to propose to me. I remember when I went to go pick that ring out. And I remember giving it to him at the altar and sharing those vows, vow renewal November 9th, unhealthy plug. I remember that. And so when he comes to you and says, hey, where's my ring? You go, it's on the table right where you left it. Now, he passed by 9 times. It doesn't mean he doesn't love you, doesn't care about you, doesn't have any emotion towards you. Read that clearly. But because you're emotional beings, you see things and you connect emotions to them so your memories are stronger. Isn't that fascinating? It's very helpful too, because guys don't remember much at all. Guys get lost unless they have a map, and even when they have a map, they hold it upside down. They don't know what to do with it. Modern age problems. Now let's look at the brain. Did I put that on the wrong finger? I did. I don't even remember. Okay, let's move on. Let's look at key parts of the brain. We're going to get scientific for just a minute. Roll with me. The hypothalamus. Everybody say that. Hypothalamus. You don't have to say the next part. This is, are you ready? Is it already on behind me? This is the brain's sex center. It's going to be a good night. This is the brain's sex center. Now watch this. This part of the brain is highly susceptible to testosterone, which we'll get back to in just a minute. Highly susceptible to testosterone. It's also bigger in men than it is in female. And everyone's like, whoa, this is new news. Here's why I'm saying this to you. No one needs to tell a lady that a man tends to be a sex animal. No one has to tell him that. But ladies, listen, when you understand that he's actually not an animal, but that God has created him uniquely within his brain, particularly with this element right here, you can better understand why he thinks all the time about certain things. See how it helps us to be a little bit better understanding? Okay, let's keep going. Ladies, we'll come for you next. Don't worry. This side's really alive. I'm not sure what's happening over here, except the one guy that's going to have a great night. Okay, let's keep this G-rated. All right, the hippocampus and the amygdala. Don't worry, there's not a lot of these. The hippocampus and the amygdala. Now, this is the part of the brain that helps us to receive, process, and to store emotional memory. So as we learned just a second ago, both are larger and far more active in the female brain. We also learned that women are better able to connect words and feelings, and because of that, the feelings can be much more powerful. Okay, so guys aren't emotionless. They just have less of this. Somebody write that down. That was good. Write a book on that, okay? So you remember things better. Now, there are 70 different chemicals that have a major impact on the brain. I'm not going to share all of them, but there's a few that I found to be highly interesting and I think highly helpful. Here's the first one. You may have heard this before, testosterone. Now let's unpack this for a minute. This is important. Testosterone is the male sex hormone, but testosterone also impacts behavior and mood within men. Okay, you okay, babe? My wife's like, this is getting crazy. Testosterone is associated with, listen to this, male aggressiveness, competitiveness, and assertiveness. Now, this is the big one. For me, I'm very competitive, partly because that man right there raised me the way that I am, but also because I have a lot of testosterone I've learned as I've done this study. So when I go to work out, I'll show up to the gym thinking I'm just going to take it easy today. No big deal. I walk in. There's like some form of a leaderboard, and I'm like, forget all that. It's on. Let's do this, whoever it is. This is why my wife won't go work out with me. She won't work. She loves to be around me, but when we hop on the treadmill, I'm like, oh, that's great. I'm going to go a little faster. Head on the way for I'm going to lift a little higher. Why? Because there's this competitive nature in me. I realize now it's testosterone. Makes so much sense. Now, that could be annoying, right? That can be silly to the ladies until we take out for a moment the competitiveness and focus on the aggressiveness and the alertness, where do you think those two would come in handy? How about when your family needs protection? How about when something, whether it's physical, emotional, spiritual, starts to threaten you or your family? All of a sudden, we realize God has hardwired men to be ready to respond to those types of situations. Isn't that fascinating? Man, God made you ready for those moments. You don't ever have to prepare for them. Though there are things you can do, don't get me wrong, that you can be better prepared. But God has prepared you to step in when everyone else is stepping out when it comes to your family. Praise the Lord for that. But testosterone, also, this is the part that helps men focus on a particular project, competition, or mission. It's testosterone that makes men kind of zero in on one thing. It helps them to stay focused. Why is that important? Well, remember what we talked about a few weeks ago. What's the main job of the man, according to Scripture? To lead his family. Isn't it nice, ladies, to know that your husband's going to zero in on that one thing, at least hardwired by God to accomplish that mission? That you could look at him and say, I don't have to worry. I know that he's going to lead our family well. Because God has hardwired him and God's walking with him, what we talked about last week. God's walking with him so I can trust he's going to make those right decisions. See, God knew all this, and he's put these things into us to help us, to lead, to provide. But it's also the culprit of why men tend to want to be independent. Ladies, we need to just understand this. Okay? Not all men, when they go to be isolated, it's because they don't love you anymore, or they don't like you, or don't want to be around you. It's possible those could be the things, but that's not what we're talking about. The reality is, because of testosterone, it makes men typically want to do two things: have sex or be independent. Now, ladies, isn't that helpful to understand? Just a little bit. You don't have to nod your head. It's okay. It's helpful to understand that when my husband needs a little bit of time to be isolated, it's not because he doesn't love me. It's not because he doesn't want to be around me, but it's because God's hardwired him with testosterone, which tends to make him want to do that. So, gentlemen, there's a healthy balance. Lady, there's a healthy balance, but isn't that helpful? So, testosterone. Then we move to oxytocin. Don't worry, it'll get more uncomfortable as we go. Oxytocin is the cuddle or the bonding hormone that's released when you, imagine this, cuddle or hug. Okay? Now this is special. Okay? This hormone is, as you can imagine, higher in ladies than it is in men, right? Men don't typically like to cuddle unless you get it. Okay? But here's the thing. Let me pause for just a minute and let me tell you something that's really important. If you have kids in this room, I want to share something that I think is helpful. Oxytocin, okay, comes to life within about 20 seconds of cuddling or hugging. When a man and a woman kiss, not only does oxytocin come, but endorphins also pass literally between two people. They are passing from one person to the next and from that person back to you. God has created kissing and cuddling, but kissing to jumpstart sex drive so that you will go and reproduce. Now, why am I saying that to you? Because listen, if you have kids and you allow your kids to kiss their boyfriend or their girlfriend, unless you're out there with the stopwatch going, okay, it's been 5 seconds, stop. I just want to tell you that they're setting themselves up for trouble, and we might be aiding in that. Now, I would never tell you how to parent. I'm just throwing out an idea here. But the more I look at this and I realize how and why God's wired us this way, it sure is helpful to understand some of the negatives that can come from this. We want to protect our kids, right, man? Now, I can tell you this, my daughter won't kiss anybody ever, even when she gets married. I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I don't care because I'm in charge and I'm the protector of this family. But the reality is this. This is a way that we can really help our kids in a sex-driven culture that we live in today. But this is also can helpful for us, right? This is good to know. Kissing has a point. Anyways, okay, let's move on. Now, we know that this is higher in women than it is in men. Oxytocin is also, the more oxytocin levels you have, the less aggressive and the more empathetic that you are. This is where, ladies, you get that nurturing and that parenting natural drive. This is why men typically don't have it as much. It doesn't mean men can't take care of kids and parent and nurture. They can. It just looks like this. You've been hardwired by God to be nurturers, and oxytocin is a big part of that. It runs through you, and drives you into that. This is also why, if you'll notice, in elementary schools, you really don't see that many male teachers. There's nothing wrong with it. You don't need to worry about it if there is one. But you don't see as many male teachers in the elementary age. You see them typically junior high, particularly in high school. Because the nurturing element that's required with younger children doesn't flow out of men like it does with women. That's why we see that. That's why they're drawn to a certain age group. Now, we know that oxytocin's lower in women, or higher in women than it is in men. But there's one moment when they almost peak at complete equalness. You know what that moment is? Sex. That's right. Listen, this is important. So, gentlemen, the only time your oxytocin level, the cuddle, the feeling of that oxytocin is equal is when and right after you have sex with your wife. Now listen, this is very important. Okay, try to move past that part and listen to this. Oxytocin levels grow the longer you're with your wife. The bonding hormone, okay, grows the longer and the more intimate that you are, the more times you're intimate with your wife. God has designed it that men and women through sex would actually bond together on a deeper level. This is why. Sex outside of marriage, sex with multiple partners in marriage, which is a reality in our culture. This is why it's so destructive. God has created it that every time that bonding agent would grow, just a little bit at a time, but it would grow. And this is why the beauty of how God has intricately put us together. He's wired you men to be drawn more to your wife. This is why these things are so important. Oxytocin levels. A couple more and we'll be done. Serotonin. This is the calming agent. So this is what helps ladies be able to sit down and have a long conversation. Okay, now it doesn't mean guys are incapable of it, but they don't last very long. Okay, this flows through your body. This is why typically with your girlfriends, you'll get together and you could talk for hours. You forget you even started the conversation 3 hours ago, right? There's just something in you and guys are like, I don't know what to do. Let's go golf because I what else do I say to you? You look nice. I look nice. Okay, move on. It's just different. Well, God's wired us this way. This is a big part of that. Why am I telling you this? Again, all of this is to help us to better understand each other. So ladies, you can't get too mad at your husband because he won't sit and talk to you for 3 hours. And if he does, pray tonight. Thank you, Lord, because this is great and not normal, all right? And guys, if you can do better at this, it'd be a win, but good luck. I don't know how to get more serotonin in you. Here's the last one. Progesterone. Okay. Again, these are all to be helpful. This helps women. This is that second element of the parenting and the nurturing. But this also gives you contentment. Now let's talk about something a little awkward, but it's important. Progesterone levels increase and decrease. They increase and decrease. This particular level, along with some others, but this particular one is driven very highly at your emotions and the emotional state. Even some might argue the mental health. Okay, why is this important? Well, because right before your period, this level drops off dramatically. And this is why all of a sudden emotions are all over, needs are all over, feelings, experiences are all over. And so guys look at a woman and are like, she's on the crazy cycle again. You don't ever say that. I know I made that up. She's on the crazy cycle again. But here's the deal. Gentlemen, when we understand that God has created it in this way, and there's things going on that we'll just leave alone. There's things going on in there. When we understand this, we will be more sympathetic in those moments. But this is very important. Because ladies, can I get an amen? We won't ask the guys because I feel bad for their ride home tonight. But can we ask, is it a hard time during that experience? It's hard. And this is why. And so when we look at this, we go, wow, this is very interesting. That God did this to us. Not as punishment, but with unique intricacy. God has created male and female. Different? Absolutely. Beautiful? You betcha. Can we come together through this? Yes, when we're better understanding with each other. Here's the last thing I want to show you. Just in a nutshell. Quickly in a nutshell, here's some thoughts. Blue is for men, pink is for girls. I don't know who started that, but I did. This says on it should say one. One is built for plans and packs. That's the guy. The other for nurturing and networking. One emphasizes competition. The other compassion and caring. One is results oriented. the other conversation and cooperation centered. One gravitates toward projects, the other toward people. Does that sound like us? And does that not sound like how God started talking about the male and the female husband and wife relationship in the scriptures? See, God knew what he was doing all along. This is just the scientific and the chemical part. We'll get into some of the more practical next week. But I hope what you see is that when we can understand even just a few of these things, we are better understanding with who's sitting across the table for us. But also, for some of us, we'll need to look in the mirror and remember, hey, the things I'm experiencing, my wife isn't always wired that way. So there's a balance here, okay? Can I leave you with this? This came up multiple times. It's good to have sex. You're welcome, gentlemen. It's good. It's good. It's a bonding thing. It's really healthy. God wired it that way. But please listen to me. Please listen to me. God wired it for your spouse. Period. Male or female. In our culture today, the statistics are absolutely astronomically ridiculous of how many people have marital affairs. And statistically speaking, it's probably happening in this room right now. Statistically speaking. Please hear me. It is deeper than just the physical. But the physical matters. God has wired you and your spouse to be closer and closer together every time that you are together. God has wired your wife to be unique. God has wired you as a man to be unique. But those uniqueness are also used when we understand them as strengths. Because wow, how they balance each other out and how we can navigate this thing together. Husbands aren't that great with kids all the time. They look a little crazy trying to hold all the children. But ladies, what you can do with multitasking and kids, it's unbelievable. God wired you that way. But husbands, man, when you get out there and you're driven and you're ready to accomplish and to finish that task, hopefully part of that task you're finishing is leading that family well and protecting them well. And I hope you never have to experience it, but know you've been wired by God. When a scary situation comes that might threaten your wife or your family, God, gentlemen, God has hardwired you to respond to those moments with alertness, with aggression. That's a good thing. Balance it. Don't use that out of context because it could be dangerous. But that's a gift from God. He has hardwired us, and it's beautiful, and I hope that was encouraging.